Okay, welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a good break over the midterm. This is episode 4 of the FE Hit, and today I'm joined all the way from M2U, which, for those of you still adjusting to the name change, is the new CIT, by Leanne McDonagh, who is the Traveller Education Coordinator. Before I speak to Leanne, just one thing to note in terms of news, that is that the CAO application process is opening this Friday, the 5th of November. There will be a growing focus on your course choices, on entry requirements, filling in the forms and so on. So please do contact me if you've got any queries around that. Okay, so to meet my guest today, who is described as an artist, a teacher and a traveller, and is crucially the Traveller Education Coordinator in Cork in MTU. So Leanne, you're very welcome to the FE podcast.
Thanks for having me, James.
Yeah. Okay, so straight to it. There are lots of questions I could ask you, but I suppose the key issue here is, why is there a need specifically for a Traveller Education Coordinator?
I think there is a need specifically for somebody to be placed in this role, because in the years that I worked prior to this role, I worked as a teacher, and I found time and time again that even though there was certain challenges and barriers facing different members of the community, and even though there was different staff members in different organizations at different levels, unfortunately, the work that needed to be done in order to challenge those barriers wasn't always being met. So I always believe if you want a job to be done and to be done correctly, or to the best of a person's ability, you need to dedicate a person to that role. So I hope in the years that I have been appointed within this role that I've been able to make quite clear changes and lead on certain projects that are actually going to challenge some of the barriers that members of my community do face.
Yeah, and there are significant barriers. But as a traveller yourself, how important is it for young traveller and Roma students who are studying at the moment to see another traveller in this role? And I suppose in answering that, maybe you could specifically address those students who are in college, in CSN, in College of Com, in St John's. What would you like them to know now about the future?
Okay. Yeah, I think it's really important to see somebody that you can relate to in a role where you might go and seek support or help. When I was younger, I didn't necessarily know anybody else in college that was from the same community as me. And I think it always helps to know that there's somebody else there that you can speak to if you need to speak to them. My advice to any current Traveller Roma students in FE or higher education at the minute is to be very aware of the supports that are out there and that you can avail of. Sometimes I meet students who don't apply for certain things because they don't think it will apply to them, or that they won't be successful in an application. And what I always say is, ask about the different initiatives, find the Access Office and just ask questions. And always avail of that information, because it is there and you just need to seek it out. In addition to that, I would also say to these students, don't be afraid to avail of that support and help. And I think sometimes students can be afraid to avail of it because there might be a fear of, or a belief that they might feel like there's some responsibility then, or an onus on them to become some type of a role model. And that might necessarily be for them. So I would always say to my students, just because you receive support via my office under certain criteria does not mean you need to become a role model, and you don't necessarily need to be visible. So I would hope that students out there are aware of that they don't necessarily need to be visible in order to receive support.
Yeah, I think going back to what you're saying about barriers as well, that those supports help students to overcome such barriers, but it's also, I suppose, what we're doing, hopefully, is taking down the barriers so that those barriers eventually will not be there, and we can eventually not have to rely on supports to get there. But there are growing numbers of students walking that route, and it's great to see Traveller and Roma students succeeding in education and walking that route as well. So brilliant, Leanne, that's great. Thanks very much. So you might be aware that we normally finish the chat by having a little venture beyond the work questions, and just to get to know people a little bit more. So I have 3 quick questions for you. First question, what's your favourite band or artist, or what sort of music do you like?
Yeah, the second part of that is much easier to answer. I don't have a favorite band or musician, and my playlist usually looks something like a cross between Dolly Parton to Beyonce. I listen to everything and anything, James, and I think I grew up listening to a lot of traditional music and country music, and that's always stayed with me, and it's something I always refer back to actually when I'm making my own work. But I could listen to everything and anything, and I think it's also a reflection of all the different people that I've met and the different influences that I've experienced in my life. So yeah, my playlist is quite diverse.
Excellent. Okay. What about your favorite TV show then? Is that going to be as diverse, or can you nail that one down?
I can't. And when I get asked this, actually, it's really hard and it's very, very boring. Once the day's work is done and the kids are put to bed, it's kind of and the animations and the kids' cartoons are turned off. It's normally just boring old EastEnders, unfortunately, unless there's some new drama or something on TV. But yeah, it's fairly boring.
No, you're far from alone in watching that. So it's a fine answer. So and the last question, best bit of advice that you were ever given, if you
Yeah,
care to share.
I really like this question because I love sharing this piece of advice with people because it has really stood to me. And I've learned a lot from this piece of advice. So a number of years ago, a mentor of mine said something to me, and she said, I was actually working on a creative art project at the time, and which wasn't going too well, but I was trying to stick with it. And that's just the type of person that I am. When I have a goal and I set a goal, I try to stick with it. But she said something to me, and she said she could see quite clearly it was failing. And I knew it was failing, and I knew it wasn't going right and it wasn't working, but I didn't want to accept that. But what this lady said to me, she said, fail and fail fast. And I sat with that for a while, and I really had to think about what did that actually mean. And you know what? It made me realize that actually we need to fail in order to progress, or we need to accept that things don't always go the right way the first time round. And there's plenty of ways to achieve a certain goal. So when I now realize that something isn't working or isn't going quite right, I always cut it in the bud, fail fast, move on and approach it differently. And it works really well. So that is something I'd love to share with people. And if only one person listens to that piece of advice, I can guarantee it will serve them well.
That makes total sense. So thanks for sharing that, Leanne. Okay, so, well, we're at the end of another episode, but we're at the start of a new month and new opportunities. So I look forward to that. Thank you for listening. Thanks once again to Leanne McDonagh. It was an absolute pleasure. And remember, everyone, to follow the weekly podcast. It's on YouTube, or you can listen to the audio on Podbean. That's all for now. Stay safe, everyone. Remember to check your emails, and I will see you next time. Thanks very much.